Hello guys and welcome back. Today we're talking about homosexuality. Now there was a life of mine that I was called being gay. To my amazement, people's ignorance is still compelling them to see gay people as being bad, as being rather degenerate, or lavish or deviant. After all we have reached in scientific findings, and after major philosophic arguments, people are still perceiving gay as being a threat to their identity, as being a bad. Now in this video, I respond to major arguments against homosexuality. Now at first, of course, we have religious arguments. Divine command theory, the idea that morality is objective, that comes from the Creator himself, and that the Creator has actually communicated with us through his holy books. He actually condemns and prohibits homosexuality. Therefore, it's a bad. Which actually takes us to the different dilemma. Does God prohibits homosexuality because it's a bad, or that because he is good and doesn't want bad? Either case, it's problematic. If he condemns homosexuality because it's a bad, it means that there is a standard of bad and good outside of God himself. And if he condemns it because he is good and doesn't want bad, he might as well just support it and adorn it and be with it, and it would be considered as a good. Morality here becomes a subject to God's whims and mood. But anyway, let's just forget about this argument. Let's just say that God doesn't want us to be homosexual, alright? Couldn't he just make us with the ability not to do so? Couldn't he just not make us with the probability or the capacity to do such thing? If I was an inventor and wanted to invent some certain gadget, you see, I wouldn't like add a feature like a button of self-destruction that somebody could use to self-destroy the gadget itself. I would make a perfect gadget, I would make a perfect device that is flawless. If I could think of a flaw, I would do my best to not make my device with that flaw. Not that I would intentionally create it with it. And then even if you say that homosexuality is wrong. Okay, it is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because God said so. Which God? And have you any evidence for God and any evidence for the truthfulness of your religion? So please provide evidence and we will finally end this debate that's been raging for centuries. Rather than that, morality cannot be objective because it comes from our own mental understanding about human condition. So as much as you perceive this as being a bad, I perceive it as being a good. Who is right, who is wrong? There is no standard, there is no arbiter of truth here. So as much as you are just doing your thing and thinking about whatever you like, I'm doing the same thing. As much as you cannot condemn me, I cannot condemn you. So how about we just leave each other doing whatever we want? And there is again the natural law theory for Thomas Aquinas. He theologically agrees that our nature is God-given and sex should be only seen for reproductive purposes. Sex is seen as a goal for reproduction. So sex is a natural thing which is provided by God for us to keep reproducing. So I would argue over here that this is actually the natural fallacy, that somebody argues that whatever is natural is actually good. Raping is also natural. A lot of animals do it. Cancer is natural. Disease is natural. Natural catastrophes are also natural. So if God provided us with a natural tendency towards having sex with the opposite sex, therefore it's a good. God also made the earth with volcanoes and with earthquakes and hurricanes. Is that also a good? Let's move on. Let's move on towards tradition. Some people argue that homosexuality is not in our tradition. Okay? Our tradition does not have same-sex marriages. This is again the argument from tradition that argues that if it is traditional, it's a good. You go to the deep tribes of Africa and you see some serious organ mutilation. Ancient China, you basically see women mutilating their feet so they can appear smaller and fit some type of a shoe because that was the standard of beauty right then. Is that also a good? It's traditional. Does it mean it's a good? Cultural and social arguments. Family structure. Some people argue that accepting homosexuality would actually threaten child rearing and child upbringing and raising. It would actually threaten family structure and would threaten society as a whole. So this actually presupposes that once we stop shaming homosexuals and accepting them for their nature and who they are, everybody would turn to be homosexual and nobody would be able to reproduce. It's such a stupid argument. It's as if you're telling me everybody would adopt homosexuality. Those people understand nothing about where does our sexual preference comes from. They think actually that we are choosing our sexual preference. That, for example, I choose to be attracted to women. A heterosexual woman chooses actually to be attracted to men. That there is actually a button once we press, toot, the whole society would turn to be homosexual, that nobody would be able to reproduce, and everybody would be marrying his same sex. This is ridiculous. Homosexuality already exists in society, and we can see that people are still marrying their opposite sex and still having children and having families. We are still seeing parks filled with children playing and schools filled with children studying. Matter of fact, homosexual partners even adopt children from the orphanage. Homosexuality was then since forever. It's not a human invention. It's a natural thing. And some people say because of the media and we start to accept it, some people are turning to be homosexual by their own accord. No, they're not. It's only that they have started to perceive some type of freedom given. They started seeing a bit of more security in the case they show up as being gay or lesbian or whatever. Would you say actually no, that they choose to? First of all, nobody chooses anything to begin with. Everything is determined. But if you say they choose to in terms of having some moral standard or some moral basis to test the person, I think you cannot do that. I think you cannot choose to be homosexual as much as you cannot choose to be heterosexual. I mean, if you are now heterosexual, okay, and you argue that no, people actually choose to be homosexual, could you choose to be homosexual yourself? You can't do it, can you? The same as you cannot choose to be homosexual and be attracted to the same sex, they cannot choose to be heterosexual and be attracted to the opposite sex. It's not a matter of choice, it's a matter of nature. Or would you argue that this would actually break our culture and our norms? What norms? Are your norms divine, objective norms? No, your norms and culture and religion and tradition and costumes are all made up. You made them all up. So as much as you made this up, you can make something up and add it to it. You take things as being God-given or the truth. You keep making up stuff depending on your language, geography, resources, race, heritage, type of society, etc. You grew up in them. You are so used to them, you think they're absolute truths. They're just made up as everything. And just because they kept on working and benefiting you doesn't mean that they will keep on doing it. That's the problem of induction. To claim that something will be the case in the future because it was the case in the past. It's illogical. Some actually argue that if we accept homosexuality in a global basis, it would actually cause some crisis in terms of population numbers. So this actually presupposes that a high population number is actually a good, which actually needs evidence, especially that we see lots of poverty, wars, famine, unemployment, and disasters that wouldn't harm anyone if there was nobody around. If there was nobody around, there is also nobody to benefit from all the good things that happen in the world. Well, do you think my unborn son is actually deprived of all the good things in the world? Do you actually think that? How ridiculous. Health concerns, the rise of HIV and various sexual transmitted diseases, which is also the case for heterosexual sex. Now we should always put in regard that homosexuality is actually a minority, not a majority. Now, would you argue that no, homosexuals actually engage in not very normal intercourse that uses something that should not be used for that? Well, our ears should not also be used to blast hardcore music in them the whole day. But here we are. Our spine is not to be used to sit in front of your laptop the whole day. But here we are. Our skulls are not to be used in sparrings, in boxing matches. But here we are. Our bodies certainly did not evolve to go in a speed of 300 kilometers. But here we are. You see, when we perceive pleasure in some activity, we definitely disregard its potential risks. We go on racing in motorbikes, knowing that something, sometime, could go wrong, but we accept the risk and go on. Parachute diving and gaming the whole day. We know that there is a risk, but we are ready to accept it for the pleasure that it has. Now, if you would again argue that the purpose of sex is having children, why something as contraception exists? And if you would argue that we wouldn't accept same-sex marriage because it destroys and threatens society and the family structure and all that, why do we see heterosexual partners having no children yet still in marriage? Why do we see a husband and his wife still in marriage even though their children are older and they are all independent? With that logic, they should be separated by now, but they're not. It means that there is something else in marriage rather than that just having children. Well, if you accepted homosexuality now, this opens the door towards various different deviant, degenerate sexual practices to be accepted too. This would be a slippery slope, but what gives? What is the problem? If we have consenting adults and they are harming nobody in the comfort of their own homes, what is the problem? I still don't understand. And some countries are actually afraid of their own demographics, that their own population is getting actually decreased over the time, and whether they accept homosexuality and legalize homosexual marriages, their own childbirth rate would actually even decline more. Well, this isn't a problem about homosexuality because a homosexual would not give birth whether you legalize it or accept it. This is a problem of why your heterosexual people don't want to give birth. And just because you think accepting homosexuality would magically press a button until to make more heterosexual people turn magically to being homosexual, I don't really know what to say to that. And at the end, some say that actually opening up to homosexuality and putting it in media and everywhere might influence children to adopt such behavior and adopt such sexuality. I think that a heterosexual adult is simply compelled from the idea of having sex with the same sex. The same thing goes with a homosexual, except if he was bisexual or anything like that. But anyway, this could be true for children because they are in this very critical state, forming who they are with experience and memories. It could be said that some behavioral tendencies could be influenced, which is of course I'm totally against. I think that a child should be raised in a total neutral environment without shoving any type of brainwashing agenda into his mind. He needs to grow until he is an adult. Right then he would already be in a knowledge of his identity and how he feels and who he is. But when I say neutral, isn't this also the case for conservative societies and families? When you are raised in a conservative family, you are molded into this heterosexual identity. Well, if you feel that your sexual instinct goes alongside with it, you are heterosexual. But if you don't, I think this person should be accepted of who he is. Same as we accept different colors, different languages, different religions, different cultures, and different ideas. But it's a natural thing that I think have occurred even before humans appeared. We find homosexuality all over the animal kingdom, between lions, penguins, giraffes, sheep, dolphins, bonobos, whatever. Why is that? Because they have no religion, no culture or tradition that thought to be God-given or absolute truth. No bias, no prejudice, no I am correct, narcissistic type of personality. Only pure instinct. We definitely do not choose to be homosexual. Nobody does. Everything is predetermined by the causal chain of events. There is no free will. We are different because our brains are different. Heterosexuals and homosexuals are different because basically who they are is different, and who they are is the nervous system. Their brains are different. There is a region which is responsible for sexual behavior in the hypothalamus, which is actually smaller in homosexual men rather than heterosexual men. But it's more in similar size for heterosexual women. Now, would you say that the individual have actually chosen the size of that region in his hypothalamus? He definitely didn't, because who he is the brain. And how can the brain change itself physically? It means that the brain should be before the brain. So there is an idea of how the brain should be, and then when the brain feels that this region, the hypothalamus, is smaller, he tends to make it bigger in order to meet this idea of being bigger. It means here that existence precedes existence, which is illogical. You just exist as you are. You are a compound of genetics and experiences. You are the nervous system. That's it. And there is of course various different researches, like a research about brain symmetry and responses to pheromones. This definitely shows scientifically that homosexuality is definitely not a choice. We are apes in a tiny dot in a rock called the Earth, in the middle of the universe, with no meaning, no guidance, no supervision, nothing. Just following pleasure and avoiding pain. Don't reject and hate, understand and accept. Thanks again for watching, and see you in the next one.